This is Time Magazine. About 4.5 million people in America get to read this magazine every week, about 6 million around the world. It is an important and prestigious job to be the managing editor of this magazine. A lot of very distinguished journalists have held that position. There's a new man at the helm. His name is Walter Isaacson. He's from New Orleans. He went to Harvard College. He was a Rhodes Scholar. He's been a political reporter, and he's been at Time Magazine for most of his adult life. His last job there was head of new media. He is back in the journalism business as the managing editor of this magazine, and I'm pleased to have him here to talk about what role these news magazines play at the time of much talk about cyberspace and computers and the internet, and to see how one person goes about imposing his or her vision on such an American institution. I'm pleased to have Walter Isaacson here. Welcome.
Hey, Charlie.
It's great to have you. Walter's an old friend, I should say,
yes, right.
So we have known each other for a number of years. Yeah. Why did you want this job? What's great? What's the challenge of running a magazine? As you say in your editing, in your old job, there was no precedent. You could have go about the process of looking at cyberspace and how do you fit an institution into it. Here, this is full of tradition from the beginning when Henry Luce established his magazine, and so you got to figure out new ways to create an old magazine.
Yeah, well, having visited cyberspace and returned to tell the tale, you get a new appreciation for old media. And Time Magazine in particular, it can be the great American magazine. It can set the agenda. You can do anything you want with Time. I mean, Time Magazine can explore the narratives of our world. It can do analysis. It can find any story that's interesting. It can fit into Time Magazine. So I think taking a product that's probably been reinvented 3,800 times over the past, every week for the past 73 years, and trying to reinvent it each week so it becomes more interesting, sort of more provocative, that's the best job in American journalism. How could you not want to do it?
What do you want to do with this magazine? How do you change it, and what's the vision you have of finding this process of regeneration?
Well, first of all, I believe strongly in the mandate that Henry Luce invented for Time Magazine. So I think all this insecurity about the role of magazines these days is silly. If you go out into cyberspace, you realize you have 1,000 different sources of information, 10,000 sources at any moment on the internet. And what you need is a brand name you can trust. You need synthesis. You need analysis. Henry Luce, in the prospectus he wrote for Time Magazine 75 years ago or so, said, at a time when people get more and more data, more and more information, and more headlines, they're ironically becoming less informed. And what they need is a magazine, a thoughtful mind that can help synthesize, analyze, bring it together, be credible, and be authoritative, to save them time as a service, but also bring them the interesting things from amid the myriad of headlines and stuff that may be hitting them.
So in a new age, in a new information age, with all the impact of all the new media, it's not a threat to the survivability of general interest news magazines?
Absolutely not. I mean, when you have 1,000 sources of information, what you're going to look for is a brand name you trust. You're going to look for a certain sensibility. In cyberspace, they talk about something called an intelligent agent that knows what you want and helps bring it to you from the myriad of things out there. Time Magazine, to use that lingo, can be your intelligent agent. It can also help set the agenda so that in a time when everything is fractured, 500 channels, hundreds of thousands of places to go on the World Wide Web, what we do need in this country, and maybe in this world, is common ground, a place where we can all sort of share a certain amount of information, a certain base of analysis, so that democracy and our society can work better. And in some ways, Time is both an intelligent agent and the common ground we have in our society.
What's the most important thing a new editor can do for a magazine, whether it's Time or Newsweek or U.S. News and World Report or Vanity Fair?
Yeah.
What can a new editor do?
Well, first of all, I think making a great magazine is really a sentence-by-sentence, paragraph-by-paragraph, story-by-story process. You have to say, okay, they're in the budget negotiations. Let's get the best reporting possible. Let's get to Dole and find out what he was really thinking. Let's see where the compromises are made. And then let's write it so that the analysis is good and that sort of thing. There's no single magic bullet. You can't sort of wave a wand and say, I'll do this, I'll redesign that, I'll put in bigger pictures, I'll do more profiles, I'll be more entertaining. No, that's that just gets you messed up. What you really need to realize is that to make a good magazine, it's pretty simple, but it's pretty basic. Good writing and good reporting.
Yeah. You've got to hire, in a competitive age, the best writers.
Sure.
You just hired Bud Trillin.
Yeah, Calvin Trillin is, first of all, he's an old-time reporter. He used to be in our Atlanta bureau 30 years ago. But his type of sensibility is, to my mind, exactly what Time Magazine's sensibility is. Smart, interested, curious, but open-minded, willing to be sensible, not to be knee-jerk and ideological, but still to have opinions, still to have thoughts.
Does the magazine in this age, where you're looking for every competitive edge you can get in a very difficult competitive environment, you're looking for names that draw to the institutional name, a Calvin Trillin, a Robert Hughes, a Robert Wright, all those
Absolutely.
people,
all of
writers
them
that
write
bring
for Time,
people. And others, Michael Kramer and other people who have a column or have a byline that's visible to people. Do you also look to create an attitude in terms of the way the magazine is? We know that when Henry Luce ran this magazine, it had an attitude about who it was and its role in America.
Well, yes, you want to have a voice, you want to have a set of core beliefs, and you want to have a set of values. The word attitude I sort of flinch at a little bit because in the past few years, attitude has taken on another meaning, which means a little bit too hip, a little bit cynical, a little bit ironic or post-ironic, whatever it may be. And I'm not sure that you want to have that sort of mix of irony and sensationalism that goes under the rubric of attitude, at least in the magazine world of New York City. So what I'm looking for, and what I think Time Magazine should be looking for, is the right tone, a set of core beliefs, and a set of core values. And I think that those are based on sort of a sensible American common ground, an approach where we ask certain basic values that we all share, like what's good for the kids, clean up after ourselves, a certain faith and free minds and free markets, and a certain sense that whatever the proposal is, the most basic question we should ask is, yes, but does it work? Those are the type of, I think, sensible approaches, attitudes, if you want, or tone that Time Magazine must bring to every piece of analysis we do, whether it's this week's cover on why crime is going down, or last week's on whether the FDA should approve a synthetic, a scientific cover about whether they should approve a synthetic type of fat for our diets. Any of those things, you can take a sensible, does-it-work approach and be of real service, of real value to readers.
Is the most important choice you make as managing editor the choice of the cover? Where you come down on what ought to be the cover for this issue?
Yeah, certainly that's the most visible choice you make. I guess also important choices of who do you hire to write for you? Who do you hire to make the photographs or whatever?
But if 2 years from now, Norm Pearlstein, who's sort of in charge of all the editors there, calls you in and says, how do we measure your performance over the last 2 years? What's the standard that you measure a magazine editor? Does it have to do with the choice of covers? Does it have to do with how you've set the direction of this magazine?
I think for Time Magazine, it's very simple how we measure ourselves, which is, have we earned the authority and the credibility to make ourselves at the center of the American debate? I think that comes from having, in terms of economics, it means getting good renewals and keeping our subscriptions up. It means having covers that have an impact. So people will say, oh, I saw that on Time Magazine. I saw Commissioner Bratton on Time Magazine. I saw Newt Gingrich on Time Magazine. It had an impact. It set the terms of the debate. But basically, to be authoritative and credible.
This cover story sets the term of the debate on crime. Finally, we're winning the war against crime. Here's why.
Right. I mean, it looks at community policing. It's a controversial subject, community policing. It's become very politicized. I mean, Bill Clinton talking about putting cops on the beat or whatever. We wanted to take a look. Does community policing actually cut down on crime? We looked at that without a preconceived notion. When we went into that cover, I didn't know what the answer was going to be. Somewhat surprisingly is yes, community policing does help cut down the crime rate. So do a lot of other things. We look at each factor, and why is it that crimes in New York have gone down 20 or 30%? Crimes across the country, major murders have gone down 10, 15% across the country. That's an important issue. And should it be putting more police on the beat? Should it be stricter sentences? Should it be drug laws? Should it be gun control? Looking at all those things and saying why. Because I think that's helping set the terms of a debate.
Yeah, Newsweek's cover story this week is a picture of Hillary Clinton saying saint or sinner. Do those two covers define your perception of the difference in those two magazines in any way? Because some might say Newsweek is hipper, Newsweek is more something.
I don't think Time needs to define itself against U.S. News, Newsweek, or whatever. I haven't, because of the snowstorm, I haven't even seen Newsweek, so I'm not quite sure. No, I think we should be defining what a magazine should be and defining the terms of the debate as we see fit without looking at, you know, what is Vanity Fair doing, The New Yorker, U.S. News, Newsweek, or any other particular magazine. I think Time is pretty secure in what its own role is in the American debate.
Yeah. When you look at the experience you had as head of new media, what did you learn there? What was it? I mean, you got involved in that. You were early on in 1992, I think, was you got sort of advised of what was going on the internet. I mean, you got sort of online and began to explore that. And somebody said, hey, we've got this Rhodes Scholar down there. Let's put him in charge of new media. And or whatever they said. What did you learn from that experience? I mean, Time, with all its resources, looking at the world of new media, having some successes, also some failures in creating new magazines. And here is the whole world of computers and new media.
Well, I think I think it was very exciting because the digital revolution, I think, is going to have a greater impact on journalism and on how we get information than anything since the invention of television, probably.
Why?
Because I think it allows with television, it's a broadcast media. For that matter, Time Magazine is broadcast. It goes out to, 4 million subscribers, 20-some-odd million readers in the same form, pretty much, around the world. With digital media, it's more personal. Each user can get what they want when they want it. So it allows a new type of journalism that doesn't have to be broad-based, that doesn't have to be based on narrative, that can be based on each user finding and exploring the type of information they want. That takes a different set of muscles, I think, to produce that. And it was useful to work on it, and I think it's an important story. The businesses of new media, the people creating the new media, these are great. These are the Henry Fords of our age. So in Time Magazine, I think you'll see a lot more coverage of that.
Speaking of all of this, there was the merger of Time, the recent story, I think, in the New York Times. Some people beginning to say, I'm not sure the merger between Time Warner and Ted Turner will go through because of the regulatory challenge that it faces, as well as some other considerations. What's your bet?
Well, first of all, when I was doing new media, I was very involved because we're doing a lot of things with CNN in our television work and in our interactive stuff. So I was involved in that. Now that I go to Time Magazine, it's no longer something I speak for. It's a story I cover. So I'll be covering, the Time Warner situation as any journalist would, and we'll be covering it in Time Magazine. So I don't know if I want to speak for the company in that regard.
Speak as a reporter.
As a reporter.
Is it perhaps at risk?
Well, I think there are many reasons that the deal may not go through. John Malone, who's the head of TCI, which is the cable company that's a major stockholder in Turner and would be in the new entity, if he doesn't want it to go through, he can probably block it. He says he wants it to go through, but if they have to change the terms of the deal, he'll find a way out. He'll find a way to block it. Likewise, the Federal Trade Commission, it's a political year. Who knows what will happen? So I think the chances are still much better than 50-50 it'll go through, but you can see a lot of roadblocks. As we're covering this deal, we can see a lot of roadblocks on the way.
Is Turner still enthusiastic for the deal?
Ted Turner's enthusiastic about everything in life, including this deal. He's a very enthusiastic man.
And what was the reaction over at the Time Inc. building when you read that Wall Street Journal story about Ted Turner?
About Ted Turner? Well, I think we look upon Ted Turner as just a truly interesting character. And the good thing about being in journalism is you just love truly interesting characters. And certainly Ted Turner's one of them.
And here is another, Newt Gingrich, Man of the Year.
Absolutely.
And you also point out 4 people it might have been, including Richard Holbrooke, including Rabin, including Bill Gates, three or 4 of the others. Some controversy about this photograph. This is not a flattering picture of Newt Gingrich.
Well, first of all, it is a totally it is the photograph that was taken. It is a very good portrait photographer, Gregory Heisler, who's done many Man of the Year photographs before. It was late in the afternoon, although the session was supposed to be at noon. It kept getting postponed because the Speaker of the House had budget discussions, and so he kept postponing it. But that's the way he looked, and it's an unretouched photograph. I happen not to think it's a bad photograph. I think it's actually a very, very evocative photograph, which is why we chose it. We chose it because he looks tough, but beleaguered. He looks determined, but like he's been through a lot. And it sort of captures both the electricity and, in some ways, the tough beating that he had been getting. And that's what a photograph, when it's a great portrait photography, is supposed to do. So there were no tricks there. It was exactly the way he felt on that day in December.
It wasn't like the O.J. cover, which got you
which I think was a mistake.
Trouble.
But, you know, I don't think you mess with photographs. I think photographs should be sacrosanct. That is a pure and good portrait photograph.
But did anybody, when Time Magazine sat around to debate this,
we were sitting around,
did anybody say, you know, this is going to look, notwithstanding it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, notwithstanding we're delayed, did anybody say, this is going to look like a cheap shot to some people who care deeply about Newt Gingrich, and they're going to raise questions about our bias?
The Speaker has been autographing him like crazy, so I don't think he minds.
So it's not an issue? Nobody's complaining about it?
Not an issue with him. We were looking at it, and yes, we said he looks beleaguered, he looks tough, he looks tired, he looks like he's been through the ringer, but he looks like he is determined to hang in there. We felt it captured the mood at the end of the year, a year that had been in which he had had an incredible impact on the way our government works, but also was going through a pretty bad period where he was going down in the polls and having some schisms within his own ranks. We felt the picture captured it. We felt it certainly wasn't unfair. In many ways, it's a flattering, tough picture. Certainly, I don't think he's objected to it, and I think that's what you try to do with portrait photography. You look at Bill, you look at Commissioner Bratton.
Yeah, but he's going to love that. Come on, I mean, Bill Bratton is going to love that.
Yeah,
Finally, we're winning the war against crime, and here's why. And there's a picture of Bill Bratton. The only person who might not love this is the mayor, who thinks he might ought to be in that photograph.
I think the mayor who commented on that cover is very gracious too. He said that it's good for the city of New York.
Let me just talk one final thing. You have, in the course of your career, written at least 3 books that I know about, 2 books that I know about. The Wise Men, which is the men who, after the war who shaped America, and then a biography of Henry Kissinger, which was made into a movie on TNT. You're now writing a biography of Benjamin Franklin. To the question of many of your friends, when do you have time to do that? Because you also, wisely, I think, have always assumed it was your responsibility as a journalist for a news weekly to get out in this city where so many people are interacting and talking about ideas, to be out there as part of that conversation. When do you write these books?
Well, I think fortunately I have some time to finish Ben Franklin. It's going to take a little bit longer now that I've gone to work at Time Magazine. I told my publishers they have to wait a few more years because I really don't think you can run a news magazine without giving your full attention to it. So there'll be some times in the late evening.
Ben is on the back burner now?
There might be some late weekend nights when I feel like doing a little bit of reading or a little bit of sketching out. You have to remember Ben Franklin took some time out from his career to launch America's first great magazine. And he was a magazine editor for a while. So I think editing Time Magazine, I can sort of consider that research into the life of Ben Franklin, see what it's like to edit a magazine.
Henry Luce once said a wonderful thing, I thought. I mean, this program, as you know, is fascinated with the impact of personality on decision-making.
Sure.
And we're interested in people.
Henry Luce, yeah.
And Henry Luce said, when is Time Magazine becoming too personality-oriented, he said, no, we didn't start that game, the Bible did.
You know, if you want to tell tales that have a moral view or that tell history or whatever it is, both like the Bible or like Time Magazine, if you tell the tale of history through the people who make it, it's easy to convey both the morals and the liveliness of the events of our time. That was one of many ingenious inventions when Henry Luce invented the Great American Magazine. And I think if you look at Bill Bratton, if you look at Newt Gingrich, is not cheap personality journalism. What it is telling about important issues and important events through the people who made them. And yes, I guess Luce was right. If it was good enough for the Bible, it's good enough for the rest of journalism.
Is the audience changing, though, that you're appealing to? I mean, do you see that in all of the competition now, that the audience you're looking for is a smarter, more informed, et cetera, audience that is looking for the kind of analysis that you can bring together with the talent that a news magazine can corral?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are looking, I think you have a very smart, it's like this show. I mean, I think the audience for Time Magazine is the audience for the Charlie Rose Show, I hope. Yeah. It's a very healthy magazine. It's a very profitable magazine. It's got a great circulation. So it's not like we have to scramble around and become more sensational or more entertainment-driven. And we have the luxury of being as smart as we can be, of thinking as hard as we can think, and of trying to appeal to the best instincts of our readers and to their minds and to their hearts without having to pander or be hot or sensationalistic or, you know, whatever it may be. So I think it's like your show. For us, we're very lucky. It's a strong, strong franchise, and we don't have to debase ourselves.
Thank you. Time Magazine, Walter Isaacson, the new managing editor, an interesting job in interesting times. We thank you for coming. Pleasure. See you soon.
Hey, thanks for having me, Charlie.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.